They laughed when she said my name. Not because it was funny, because it was me. I'd been quiet for years, swallowing every small humiliation my family fed me like it was dinner, telling myself that kindness would be enough to earn a seat at their table someday. But that night, as my sister raised her glass, smiling wide and perfect, and called me out in front of everyone, my brave sister, still single, still surviving, something in me split. The laughter didn't sting anymore. It burned. For the first time, I saw it for what it was. Not a joke, not a misunderstanding, but a truth they believed, that I was lesser, disposable. A cautionary tale dressed in polite clothes. My name is Calyptra Boone, and I've spent a lifetime keeping peace that never kept me. But that night, I stopped being the quiet one. They just didn't know it yet. The applause had already faded, but the laughter lingered, sharp, glassy, cutting through the air until it reached me. I sat still, my palms pressed against my knees to keep from shaking. Somewhere behind the music and chatter, I could hear my own heartbeat, steady but heavy, like it was trying to remind me I was still there. Rowan's small hand rested on mine beneath the table. He didn't look up. He didn't have to. The silence between us said enough. Around us, crystal glasses clinked, cameras flashed, people smiled, because that's what people do when cruelty comes dressed as charm. I kept my eyes on the tablecloth, tracing the embroidered edges like I might fall apart if I looked anywhere else. I had promised myself I wouldn't let them see me break again. Not here. Not this time. My mother sat a few tables away, her smile stretched thin, all pride and performance. Verity stood at the center of it all, glowing beneath the chandeliers, soaking in the attention that had always belonged to her. She looked perfect, every curl, every gesture rehearsed for the world that adored her. I'd forgotten how exhausting her perfection could be, how small it made everything around her feel. When the music softened, I caught my breath, lifted my head, and that's when I saw him. Standing by the window, away from the noise, a man was watching me with an expression I couldn't name. Something like recognition flickered in his eyes, the kind that pulls at the corner of an old memory you never meant to reopen. For a second, it felt like time folded in on itself, like the past had just walked into the room wearing a suit and a polite smile. I didn't know yet that moment would change everything. I only knew one thing, whatever this was. It wasn't the first time our lives had touched. That night, I stayed near the far corner of the ballroom, pretending to adjust the seating chart while everyone else laughed too loudly. Verity was in her element, bright, effortless, talking fast enough to fill any silence. May sipped her wine, nodding at the right moments, her smile practiced from years of keeping up appearances. I felt invisible until a shadow fell across the table. Eamon Hale stood there, holding a glass of whiskey. His voice carried that slow Savannah drawl, low and easy, like the river outside. He said he remembered someone who used to read stories at St. Joseph's Hospital. For a second, I couldn't breathe. When I asked how he knew, he mentioned his sister, Lena Hale, a girl with a paper-thin voice who once told him there was a woman with a voice like a nightlight, soft enough to make dying less frightening. The sound of her name cracked something open inside me. I could still see that pale hand clutching a children's book, the whisper of her breathing fading out like a tide. I told him I remembered her. She had been the reason I stayed at the hospital longer than I'd planned. He studied me quietly, not with curiosity, but with a kind of recognition. In that stillness, I felt something rare. A person looking at me, not as the family's mistake, but as someone who had once mattered. Later, when the dinner ended and the last violin note dissolved into the night, Verity found me in the hallway. Her perfume hit before her words. She smiled, sharp and beautiful, and told me not to forget my place, not to look at her fiancé like that. I laughed softly. I hadn't looked at him any particular way, but she kept talking, her tone slipping. He was her future, she said, and I was just the past no one wanted. Her voice trailed off. leaving a taste of salt in the air, the kind that comes from the river when a storm's on its way. A week later, I went back to River House to finalize the wedding budget. The place was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of lilies and polished wood. On the desk sat a cream envelope stamped with the logo of St. Joseph's. I shouldn't have opened it, but curiosity felt like instinct. Inside was a transfer receipt, money withdrawn from the hospital fund. Recipient, Verity Boone. Authorized by Calyptra Boone. My own name stared back at me. My hands went cold. I checked the other folders, and there they were, 3 more documents, all with my forged signature. I drove straight to Verity's apartment that night. She opened the door in silk and irritation. When I laid the papers in front of her, she glanced at them once and smiled. That same flawless, camera-ready smile. She said she thought I'd be used to people borrowing my name for something good. That I always wanted to help, didn't I? I bit my lip until I tasted blood. She leaned in, lowering her voice. If I exposed her, the wedding would implode, and May would never forgive me. I looked at her long enough to see it, the flicker behind her eyes. Fear. Not of guilt, but of losing the mask she'd spent years perfecting. When I left, the night air clung thick with humidity. Rowan was waiting on the couch, a blanket wrapped around him. He asked why his aunt called me a shadow. I told him some people are afraid of their own reflection, and they mistake light for threat. Outside, the wind was rising. The river's surface shimmered under the streetlights, restless and dark. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that storm wasn't just weather. It was the beginning of everything unraveling. The air that afternoon felt thick enough to drink. Savannah in June didn't move. It just shimmered. Verity stood in her living room in a half-zipped gown, glass of wine in hand, humming to herself. When she caught me watching, she smirked. Want to try it on? I set the folder on the table between us. Explain this. My name's on the hospital fund transfers. She barely looked down. Probably a clerical error, I said quietly. I am the clerk. Her smile froze. Then she shrugged. Sometimes family has to make sacrifices. I borrowed that money to cover Mother's debts. If you expose me, think about who she'll blame. Mother's voice cut in from the doorway. Calyptra, she said, weary and sharp. So many people are counting on this wedding. Stay quiet. You've already ruined your own life. Don't ruin hers. I clenched my hands. I don't want to destroy anything. I just want truth. Truth won't make you respectable, she replied, turning away. When I left, Eamon's car idled at the curb. He asked if everything was okay. Family matters, I said. Whose family? Yours or theirs? He asked softly. That night, Rowan asked why people believed Aunt Verity more than me. Because truth makes people lose their comfort. I told him. Then I copied the documents, sealed them in a bank safe, not to strike, but to survive. 3 days later, we met at a cafe along the river. Sunlight hit his cup, turning coffee to gold. He said he felt like he was marrying a stranger. Maybe he chose love out of fear of being empty. I asked if he pitied me. He said I reminded him of his sister, the one who believed good people didn't need applause. The light caught the seashell pendant Rowan made me. Eamon smiled. He said shells survive storms and still shine. I told him my son saw me that way. He said, so did he. Then the door opened. Verity stood there, watching. No words. Just a smile sharp enough to draw blood before she turned and left. That evening, May called, accusing me of turning Eamon against her daughter. I said nothing. Some lies don't need defense. Later, Eamon texted, I believe you. I'll confront her myself. I sat on the porch, the river whispering below. If truth must hurt, I thought, let it hurt clean. Across town, Verity opened her laptop and typed an email, anonymous, venomous, accusing me of stealing from the very fund she'd robbed. The storm had finally found its voice. Mother insisted I attend the final fitting, said it was only to help confirm the VIP list. The bridal boutique sat inside an old building downtown, its crystal lights scattering sunlight into fragments that danced across the floor. Verity stood in the center, wrapped in white silk and attention, while stylists and photographers orbited around her like satellites. She caught my reflection in the mirror and smiled too sweetly. "Could you step back a little? You're catching the light." Then, louder, so the room could hear. "Maybe just stay out of the frame altogether. Eamon doesn't need you in our memories." Laughter rippled through the air. I stayed still, then turned toward the door just as Eamon entered. The laughter died. His expression was stone. Verity's voice faltered when she greeted him. He only said he needed to talk, privately. They stepped outside. I could still hear fragments: money, fund, signature. When she returned, her face was pale, but her smile perfectly intact. "Everything's fine," she said. "Go home, Calyptra. No one here needs your pity." As I left, one of the assistants whispered, "Who is she? The bride's sister?" Someone answered, "Heard she doesn't have a husband." A few soft laughs followed me out. That night, Rowan came home with a split lip. He said some boys at school called him the kid without a father. I pressed a cold cloth to his mouth, fighting the tremor in my voice. "You don't need a father to know your worth." He stared at me, quiet, then asked if I believed that myself. After he slept, I opened an email from an unknown sender. "We know what you did to the St. Joseph's Fund." Attached was the forged document with my signature. I stared at it until the words blurred. Outside, thunder rolled above the river, the wind hissing through the trees. The storm was coming, and this time, it had my name on it. The real storm hit Savannah the night of the rehearsal dinner. Rain whipped against the glass, like it was trying to erase the evening altogether. I nearly stayed home until Mother called. "You'll come." People talk. By the time I arrived, the ballroom was buzzing, every glass and candle reflecting back a lie. Verity's smile gleamed from across the room. She raised her glass when she saw me. "So glad you could make it," she called out, her voice honeyed with malice. "I came to see what I needed to." I said, "Later." Eamon took the microphone. He began his toast but stopped halfway, eyes meeting mine. "I want to thank the person who taught me silence can kill what's right." The crowd clapped uncertainly. Verity's hand trembled on her glass. After the dinner, she found me under the awning outside. Rain poured around us, a curtain of noise. She hissed that she'd make sure everyone saw me as the liar. I told her she wouldn't have to try. They'd see for themselves. She threw a soggy envelope at me. Inside were printed accusations, my name scrawled beneath a fake signature. "When the police come," she said, "let's see who they believe." I showed her my phone, a photo of her signing the withdrawal slip. Her eyes went flat. "Where did you get that?" "From the man you're about to marry." She laughed. "Too loud, too wild. He'll never leave me. He needs what my name gives him." I said, "He doesn't need anything but the truth." Lightning flashed, washing her face in white. One terrified, one calm. Two sides of the same storm. When I reached home, Eamon stood waiting under the porch light, drenched through. "I saw the footage," he said. "She signed it. What will you do?" I asked. "Nothing until tomorrow. Tomorrow's the wedding." "No, Calyptra. Tomorrow's the reckoning." He told me he'd already sent the evidence to the board and the press. By morning, the story would break. "Are you sure?" I asked. "You'll lose everything." He looked out at the rain. "Honor doesn't live in lies," he said. "I'm done pretending." We stood there under the dripping eaves, rain sliding over our joined hands. Not a promise, but an understanding, down by the river. The water rose higher, pressing against its banks, as if the whole city was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to finally break loose. The morning of the wedding dawned impossibly clear. The storm had passed, leaving the air washed and bright, the streets still damp like they were holding their breath. I hadn't planned to go until Mother called again. Her voice clipped with pride and warning. "You need to be there. People will notice if you're not." Forsyth Park shimmered under the sunlight. Rows of oak trees bent together to form a cathedral of green and gold. Every detail screamed perfection. Ivory chairs, soft jazz, flowers trained to look effortless. It was beautiful and utterly false. I sat in the last row beside Rowan. He took my hand, his fingers trembling. If they start again, can we go home? I whispered that we weren't running this time. When the music stopped, Verity floated to the stage in a flood of silk. She smiled wide, the kind that hides rot under gloss. She thanked the guests, and then, too easily, thanked me. Said she'd learned from me that failure could be useful. Without my example, she'd never know what not to become. Laughter scattered like glass. A few people winced. Rowan's hand tightened painfully around mine. I was about to leave when a chair scraped behind me. Eamon stood, straightening his jacket, calm as a tide about to turn. "Sorry," he said into the microphone. "I need to say something." Verity tried to stop him, her smile cracking, but he went on. "She's right. This wedding has taught me something. Today I finally understand who deserves to be called family." The crowd shifted uneasily. He paused, scanning the room. "Before I met Verity, I had a sister. She died young. There was a woman who made her last days bearable. Her name was Calyptra Boone." The air went silent, the kind that hums before it breaks. Verity's face drained of color. Eamon's voice stayed even. "She forged Calyptra's signature, stole from the St. Joseph's Fund. The woman she mocked saved my sister's life when I couldn't. I won't marry cruelty disguised as grace." Mother stood up, shouting that he didn't understand. He turned toward her. "I understand perfectly." He slipped off the ring, set it on the microphone, and said he was ending the wedding. Verity screamed threats, but he only answered, "Maybe. But at least I won't be silent anymore." Gasps rippled through the park. Whispers, cameras, chaos. I rose quietly, taking Rowan's hand. We walked past the stairs, past the broken music and the glittering lies. Outside, sunlight spilled through wet branches, scattering into 1,000 trembling sparks. Rowan looked up at me. "They're all staring. Let them," I said. "For once, they're seeing clearly." Savannah woke like a body, cooling after fever. The sky was pale, quiet, emptied of its storm. On the front page of the Savannah Chronicle, a headline stretched across the fold. "Wedding of the Year turns into scandal of the decade." Beneath it, a photo of Verity shielding her face, mascara streaking down like ink tears. The phone rang all morning, reporters, lawyers, my mother. But I let it buzz unanswered. Rowan sat at the kitchen table, feet swinging, the newspaper spread before him. He didn't look up when he asked if everyone knew now. "They do," I said, "and we don't have to prove anything anymore." By noon, Eamon appeared at my door. His sleeves were rolled, his face drawn but calm, the kind of tired that comes from telling the truth. He said he'd handed over all the evidence to the board and issued a public apology. Verity would be investigated. And me. My name was cleared. I told him I never lost it. I only let them misuse it for a while. He smiled faintly, the way people do when they've run out of words that matter. He said he owed me. I said he didn't. He'd just chosen to stop pretending. Rowan came out holding a sheet of paper, a crayon drawing of a river, a bridge arching over it. He said he made it for Eamon, the place where we once talked. Eamon knelt, taking the drawing carefully, saying he'd keep it as a reminder of people who help you stand when you're afraid to speak. Watching them, I felt something loosen inside me. Justice isn't loud, I thought. It doesn't shout or gloat. Sometimes it's just someone finally saying the right thing, knowing it could cost everything. That afternoon, I walked the riverbank where moss hung like old lace from the oaks. The water shimmered, slow and clean again. I remembered the laughter, the shame, the crash of glass, and Eamon's voice cutting through it all. "Thank you for not staying silent," I whispered. The wind carried it away, scattering petals across the surface of the water, like fragments of a past finally letting go. A year later, winter came to Savannah like a secret, light snow falling where it rarely dared. I'd started Boone and Bloom Consulting, helping charities stay honest. On my office wall hung Rowan's drawing, a woman standing by the river, light spilling over her face, a bridge behind her. At the bottom, he'd written, "My mom, the one who isn't afraid to tell the truth." Eamon still lived here. He'd left his family's firm, working instead with nonprofits. We didn't define whatever existed between us. We shared dinners, laughter, and quiet that didn't feel empty. Love, I realized, wasn't what he gave me. It was what he helped me remember, that I was worth choosing. On Christmas Eve, he arrived with a small box. Inside was a vintage ring and an old photo of me reading to Lena. He said Lena had asked him to keep it for the person who proved kindness still mattered. I laughed softly, tears warm against the cold. People once called me second-hand, but second-hand means lived in, proven, enduring, and I'm still here. He smiled, brushed a tear from my cheek, and said nothing new could ever match something real. Outside, church bells drifted over the river, and for the first time, I felt truly seen. They used to say I was the quiet one, the calm in a family that fed on noise. Maybe that's why they thought I didn't feel things the way they did. But silence doesn't mean you stop hurting. It just means you've learned there's no point screaming when no one's listening. I spent years letting their laughter scrape against my patience, pretending indifference while they dressed their cruelty as charm. And somewhere between their jokes and my restraint, I disappeared, not all at once, just piece by piece, until even my name sounded small in their mouths. But tonight, as I watched my sister smile like she'd already won, something in me went still, not angry, not bitter, just done. They don't know it yet, but the silence they taught me to keep is about to speak for itself. The afternoon light slid through the blinds and brushed across my desk. Soft enough to make the edges of the paper glow, on top of the case files sat an envelope I'd already opened 3